Hello, I'm Bret and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is Nadia Khalil Bradley. Nadia is the author of Origins of Truth, Words that Will Awaken You to the Truth of Your Heart. She's a Palestinian American who was raised as a practicing Muslim. As an adult, she began to hear the voice of Jesus Christ and went on to record those conversations in her journal. She was born in Chicago and now lives here in Southern California. Together, she and her husband Sterling have 6 children. Nadia Khalil Bradley, welcome to The Defining Moment. It's really a pleasure for me to welcome you here to our studio.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Our topic today is Jesus Speaks to a Muslim Woman. And I'd like to begin by asking you to share a defining moment from your life.
I'll share the biggest defining moment of my life, and that was realizing that Christ is around by visiting me. And there were events that led up to that. And I guess when you really do ask God a question, and you ask it enough times until you really drill down to the purity of your heart, you do hear the answers. They're there, but you get to hear them. And one question leads to another, and as your questions get better, your answers get better. And I was involved in a situation in my life where I was part of an arranged marriage, and I had nowhere to go with what was going on in my life. I didn't want to involve my parents. I didn't want to involve family or friends in the issues that we had. And so I realized people were people just like me, but I wanted to talk to God. And so I would wake up in the middle of the night and start writing to God and asking questions, not about how bad or awful things were. I was asking God questions as how could somebody have a home and children and a wife and not need for money and still not be happy? What happens to a person that gets them to that place? And I would just ask these questions and unload that, and I would be able to make it through the next day. In the meantime, through all of that, as time went on, I just kept writing, and it became my outlet. And it was like my secret little world of just relief and not really expecting answers or knowing anything would come back. Over time, I ended up getting divorced, and I'll discuss that a little bit further later on, but I ended up getting divorced, and I was asking much more poignant questions. And I would ask about people and intentions, and I would say, I know in my heart I did everything I can. I felt very clean about it. And I would just keep asking more questions, but why is it so hard for me to go on, and why do I feel alone, and why aren't, my kids able to stay with me all the time? And there were a lot of splitting up, which I haven't done before. I've never been without my children, which was very hard for me. And as time went on, I would get answers that I didn't understand. And I would hear them, and I'd maybe be somewhere like in Vons in the checkout line, and I'd be, oh my gosh, I get that. So I realized I wasn't writing alone. And I didn't know who could be around me, and I never told anybody, because now I started feeling like I was in this special place, but no one would understand, or they'd think I'm crazy. I didn't really think about it during the day. I would just, go to work and pick up my kids and make dinner and just do what we all do. And then at night I'd just start writing, and it became a ritual for me to just write at night and ask God questions, and sometimes just talk about my day to just kind of put things in order mentally for myself. And as time went on, it was very interesting, because I started writing less, that I was saying things, and yet I would start typing a lot faster and write things that relieved me or gave me a next step or a thought that increased my thinking about myself or my actions or my motivations or why I would do things. And one day it was like maybe 9:30 at night, before like the bookstores would close, and I got this feeling to go to Borders. And I'm like, what am I going to Borders for now? And I had like flannel pajama bottoms on, and I took my son and we both went to Borders, and I went upstairs and I found this little book called Angels Speak. And I thought, wow, maybe that's what's happening to me. Maybe that's why I'm here. And I just felt like I just landed there, even though I drove there. And once I got there, it felt like that. And I remember taking the book and walking down the stairs and thinking to myself, why am I buying this book? I can't even afford to buy anything extra right now. And I'm talking to myself, and I still bought the book. I brought it home, and I thought, I started reading it, and I called the author. I realized she lived in La Jolla, California, and I wanted to go meet her and see if maybe she knew what I knew or could help me with what I was discovering. And I did go down and meet with her. And I got there, she told me, there's a class she teaches, and it's on Saturdays, and I'm like, I'm coming. Where is it? I'm there. And she told me it was at her home, so I went early, and I got there about an hour early, and I was helping her wash dishes. I was taking out her trash. I was doing anything I can to just kind of talk to her and dig, because I was so curious as to what was going on. And she looked at me and she said, they're all around you. And I said, what exactly is around me? And she said, there's angels around you. They're around everybody. My job is to tell people that. Your job is different. I don't know exactly why you're coming to me, but you have a different job to do, and you know a lot more than I know. This is all I do, is tell people. So in a way, I was happy that at least I knew that, but I really wanted more comfort, more validation, more understanding. But she was the beginning of that. So then she gave me the names of some of them, which are all in the book. There's a lot of them to name, but there were these two little ones called Teddy and Joe. They were like little kids, and they'd always just like fly around and try to wake me up all the time. And I'm like, I can't stay awake 24 hours a day. And you could tell them that, and they do leave you alone. They just don't know what they don't know. They're just free-flowing and very pure. And it's interesting because I addressed them all and asked them who they were. And they told me who they were and what their jobs were, what their roles were. For them, they're called gifts. Everybody has a gift. And that includes every one of us. We just happen to be on earth doing what we're doing. So I kept going, and they kept telling me, well, I would see them. And so I would be alone every once in a while, and I'd go, don't come now, because if you come now, I'll have a heart attack and die. I don't know what to do with you. But then I figured when I'm with people, they're not going to come, so I assumed. And this went on for a few months. It all led to a day, it was April 11th, 2001. I had just turned 40 a couple of weeks beforehand, and one of my clients took me out for my birthday. And we were having dinner, and she was late coming in. And it turned out she had an appointment with a therapist before she came to me, but she didn't tell me that. She just said, I'm sorry, I'm late. I'm glad I got here and whatever. We had dinner and we were talking, and while we were talking, I was sitting just like we're sitting now, and I felt a very warm breeze come through me. It was like through my body. It wasn't, how you normally feel a breeze, it's on your skin and you get the chills or whatever happens to you. It wasn't like that at all. It was internal, and it was a very calming, peaceful effect. And all I could do was just feel so good. And I don't drink or anything, and I knew it wasn't from that. And I started thinking, oh my gosh, I see all this light, and all I could see was between you and me, let's say, was just pure white light. And within that light, I saw the form of a face. And that face started talking to me, but it didn't move lips or anything. It just was like, in a second, I knew all of these things. And I felt very absolute knowing them. It didn't feel like, oh, I'm so excited and happy, and it didn't feel like, it didn't have the emotions we have attached to it. It was just a very absolute, all-knowing kind of a feeling. And I knew all of these things in a second. And before I could stop to think, he said, I'm Christ. And I'm thinking, Christ who? Like Jesus Christ in the Christian churches? And he just said, I'm Christ. And so I'm like, okay. And then he said, your job is to bridge people's souls back to them. And I'm like, okay. I'm single with 2 kids, and I'm working, and I'm just making it. And how do I do that? And before I could finish thinking it, it's like he already knew. And then in an instant started talking through me to the girl in front of me about her family. And I guess the issues that she had come to dinner with, he addressed those issues. She was asking me, what did you just say? And I said, I keep saying it. I couldn't stop. So she pulled her checkbook out and started writing on her deposit slips what I was saying. And then it kind of calmed down, and in the middle of it, I didn't know what was happening. It became interesting to me, what he was saying to her. And then I thought maybe something really wrong had happened in her family, and I said, were you molested? And she said, no. And I said, oh, okay, it just sounded so serious, And he addressed to her about her relationship with her father and why it was strained and where the strengths were, and his weakness was actually exemplified onto her. And that's why he took it out on her, because she was the most like him. And he wanted her to succeed where he didn't. And that's why he pushed her more than he pushed the other kids. And it all made sense to her. She was no longer angry. It gave her love in an objective form, and something we can do something with, because anger stops us from doing. Anger gives us steps backwards. We say, I'm going to do this and this and this, which takes us away from love. But he brought her into love. It was so beautiful to watch and to see. And then it like went away. And she wanted to take those slips and leave me and run and call her mother and tell her mother what just happened. In the meantime, I told her, well, something just came to me, and he said he was Christ. She believed me, which I did not expect, because I was still trying to believe myself in that moment. And when she wanted to leave, I'm like, no, you cannot go. You have to stay with me, because I can't be alone right now. And I'm going to go home alone, and I don't know if I can do this. And she said, you should see your face. And I'm like, what does it look like? And she said, I don't even know. You just look peaceful, but you're so bright. Mm. I wish I could have seen it, but it wasn't meant for me to see. But feeling it was pretty darn good. Mm. So that was one defining moment that really led to many others. That led to my writing changing, my writing teaching me a lot more now that everything was out in the open. I knew I was going to see someone. I didn't expect it to be Christ. And me being Muslim, it taught me that if he can come to me, all this talk about God is one is true. There isn't one God for each religion. Religion is a vehicle to God if that's what brings you closer to God. Now, if it takes you away from God, you really have to understand why you're there, because the goal isn't to be away from that love. It's to be closer to it. And it's not like what we think. It's not unrelatable. It's not far away. It doesn't exist in fear and doubt and worry. All those things stagnate us, again, taking away from who we are and who we could be. And that's definitely not what God does. God gives. And then I started seeing what we as people take away. What we allowed ourselves to tap into that beauty and say, you can't have it unless it's this way. You can't have it unless you've paid this much money. You can't have that unless, you have this car or that house. Or we turned love into things. And then God's love was separate. I'm like, where did God's love go? And that's actually the driver of all of our cars. When we're mad at God, we say we don't believe in him, or we didn't get what we wanted from him, but then we're practicing conditional love on God. And a lot of times we can only do that if that's what we feel he's doing to us. And a lot of times we're taught that.
Amazing what you've just shared. Thank you so much for opening your heart and sharing that with our audience. What do you feel are the most significant messages that you've received so far from Jesus?
The very first one. I think it's the one that resonates through all the other messages. It's like the stem of the tree that grew. And it was that 1 ounce of pure love or pure intent will overcome any obstacle, provided that it's pure. And my first question was, how do you know? How do you know if you're pure? How do you know if it's not self-motivated? What's the difference? And you really have to ask yourself a question. Why am I doing this? What do I want back from anything that you're doing?
Thank you so much. Tell us about the kinds of spiritual experiences people have had when you're giving public speeches.
That one is a fun one for me.
Okay.
Only because I can't see it.
Uh-huh.
I'm the one speaking, so I've never seen this. And so to hear it just amazes me.
Mm.
It amazes me for a couple of reasons, but what does happen is I disappear somehow, and there's just a light. And people still see me and hear me, but the light gets brighter than me at some point, and it doesn't matter if they can see me because they're looking at this light. And I had done a seminar, and there was about 15 people there. And we were in a room, and I was behind a podium. It was my first seminar, so I was attached to the podium pretty tightly in the beginning. And I was planning to do this whole seminar without telling anybody that I knew Christ. I was still very, very shy about it. I didn't want people to think I was crazy, and I realized I was the only one doing that most of the time, but I still had to grow and understand what I knew and be able to take that and share it with people. But at that time, I wasn't ready yet. So I did a whole 6-page introduction for this group of 15 people, and I took out the entire Christ factor, and I put it in large type so I could read it and not lose my place and not slip. And I wanted to just give the messages the way I heard them and figured everyone would just get the messages and I would not be attached to it, which was my goal. So I did that, and I gave everyone folders and pens and papers and a whole agenda and everything. And I was in 2 minutes up at that podium. And I looked at everyone and I said, I'm really sorry I can't read the introduction or follow the agenda as I planned. Because the biggest part of this, I'm not telling you. And I actually started by telling them about Christ. And that room was so quiet. No one could move, including myself, other than my lips talking. And as we were standing, they were sitting and I was standing there. This went on for 3 hours. We just talked. I stopped them in an hour and a half and said, do you want a break? They said no. So they stayed, and we went all the way to lunch. Once lunch came, Sterling, my husband, said to me, he was sitting in the back of the room, get away from the podium. You're standing behind that podium, just walk around. So then, after lunch, I was standing behind there, and then he just gave me that look, and I was like, okay, I'm going. And I did, and I started walking around in the room. And one of the ladies raised her hand. She was about 75 years old. And she said to me, when you were standing there, there was a light around your head, and I thought it was from the window. But when you moved, it moved. Then another girl next to her raised her hand, who came from Las Vegas to this seminar in California. And she said, and there's a gold ball by it. And I'm like, wow, I wish I could see it. And then a third person. And then the ones who didn't say it during the seminar came and told me afterwards. And it just follows me around. And sometimes when I'm speaking, it happens. I can't tell you when because I can't see it. Sometimes it does obscure my vision a little bit, but I can't see that good far anyway. So, I almost can't tell, but I can feel the heat of it. Mm. And I can't tell you when it's going to happen, but when I speak publicly, it's been happening. And it's kind of fun that people can see that, because then they listen. And the whole point is hearing.
Yeah.
Being able to hear something that you can use, that means something to you. And I may never know who that person is, but they know who they are. And there is no soul more important than another. It's one of the consistent messages I've gotten. And I can't even look at life the same. Everyone has a gift, everyone has their role, and every role has its challenges. And we're here to grow our souls within those challenges.
Thank you so much. How have your spiritual experiences altered your understanding of God?
Oh, it taught me something huge. It taught me that God is not a religion. We all say God is our religion, but God is not a religion. There was God before there was the paths to Him. We created different ways to get to Him, like I had said earlier, But God can't be a religion. If I'm Muslim and the one that and Christ who everyone claims as theirs, it doesn't mean he's mine. It just means that he's always been for everybody. If there's a message of love and there is no soul more important than another, then that message is for everybody. No one is left behind. There is no soul on earth left behind. I don't care who they are. Anyone that's listening to us speak, they're not left behind. Even if they're sitting alone watching us, thinking that nobody in this world cares about them, they're lying. And that's really what's bothering them. Because people do care about each other. But you have to allow them to care. And when you can start to care about yourself, that's when you can care about others. And until you can, you will feel alone. But it's not because others aren't around you. It's because you yourself are not around you. And in the book, there's so many things that bring that back to you, that remind you who you are. When you were that kid and you were running around and nobody started telling you what you can't do yet. And then you get to remember that. And then you say, wow, that person who just happened to say this while they were walking by and it totally shaped my life. But they'd forgotten and they're already, God knows where they are now. Yet you took that little bit of information and created a life around it. And sometimes if you let that take away from you, like someone says, oh, you're always messy. And then every time something's messy, like, I'm always messy. You let them and their issues take strength in your life. And one of the beauties of reading the words of Christ in this book, or the things I had to go through to write the book, because I had to experience everything to understand it, you're reminded that all of that is in your hands. One of the questions Christ asked me was, who would you be if everyone you knew didn't know you? That's you. If you can define that or describe that. Oh, I'm a person who likes this. I'm a person who does that. It doesn't have to be great. It just has to be real, because real is the greatest feeling. We can't create great. We can only feel it.
Okay, thank you so much. In what way have your spiritual experiences transformed your understanding of social and global issues?
They had made me feel more part of what goes on everywhere. That people are people, and love is love is love. And truth is just truth, and that is for everybody. So just because I can't see somebody, or they're in another country, or they don't agree with me on a political level, it doesn't mean that they're wrong or bad or gets to get hurt because we decided, or I decided, or someone decided that they're not human, or they're not worth it, or we're better than anybody. And every generation has had their we're better than and their common enemy. And it's funny that every time that slot gets emptied, we fill it with another group of people without realizing they're families. Everybody is different on earth. And then we're all the same. And then we're all different again. We're all different in the first different by race and creed and location. And that teaches us our challenge. That teaches us who we are by defining who we are not. It doesn't mean one has to be better than the other, but we, that's human, have done that. We're all the same, that we all come from a mother. We all have families and brothers and sisters and favorite foods and favorite TV shows and couches in our homes. And then we're all different again in our talents, because nobody has a monopoly on wisdom. We aren't meant for each one of us to know everything. That creates the need to know each other and to get along and to create growth with each other's talents, rather than strip each other because of resources or talents or whatever it is we think that we don't possess but we want to own.
Okay, thank you so much. Has Jesus given you a specific mission to dedicate your life to?
Yes. And me sitting here, that's pretty much just speaking, writing the book. I graduated from college. I was into selling financial products. I was a licensed stockbroker, although I didn't trade on the floor. I worked with retired people and maximized their income for their lifetimes. And as time went on, I ended up staying home and raising my children. And books, I never thought. However, I always knew that my life would change at 40. I just didn't know what it was. And as things happened in my life, I would go, oh, is this it? Oh, is that it? Because I just knew something. I just didn't know what. And as I would do that, I'd think, oh, and then I got divorced. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't expect that one. Okay, that's like, where does this take me? And it took me into going from being a Muslim person and living in that culture as a complete support system. It's almost like an ecosystem,
sure. Mm-hmm.
But it's a support system, a social support system, and being on my own. And that question that I just said before is, who would you be if nobody knew who you were? I had to define that, because everybody I knew had an issue with me now because I was divorced. Some never talked to me. Some only wanted to talk to me to find out the latest scoop. And I just had to really know what my priorities were and know that I didn't know who I was right now for a while, but that whatever I put into my life would be a choice as opposed to an already done template. And I was just following the lead of that template.
Okay, thank you so much. How can our viewers get a copy of your book, Origins of Truth?
You can get a copy of Origins of Truth through our website, which is by the same name, originsoftruth.com.
Nadia, Khalil, Bradley, thank you so much for having been our guest today on The Defining Moment. It's really been a pleasure for me to have you here.
Thank you, Bret.
You've been watching The Defining Moment for creating the culture of conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.